10/11/2021 minutes. They're in your packet. I was not here. Any questions or concerns, or I will take a motion? Yes, Lou?
I'll make the motion
Okay, thank you.
to accept the minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a second by Martins. All in favor say aye. Aye. I'm aye as well. No nays, and we accept that unanimously. Number 2, Human Resources Report for October.
There we go. Any questions on the report? Yeah.
I was just curious on, let me find it, new hires. It looks like a yearly rundown,
Yes.
but then there's another one where people move, so I had to look back and forth to see which employees are in different places now. Is there a way to maybe put something on there that says new hire, but they either left or moved to a different position in that column?
I can talk to Jennifer and see what she can work up for us.
Just
She's
curious,
pretty good
just
at
make it a
that.
little easier looking at it, I think.
Sure.
If not, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, so what we have right now is people who are hired from the outside are listed in the new hire list, and then promotions and transfers are in the second one. So they rarely overlap. So someone from new hire is very rarely on that promotional list because we have a work rule that says you have to be in your position for 6 months before you can be considered for a promotion. So usually you're not on both lists. So you're looking at those to be in one list together, or if somebody from the new hire list is also promoted or transferred, for that to be highlighted in some way?
I just noticed one person that was hired, and then there was someone else promoted to that position, so I assume that person was either moved or, I guess
may also
they
have-
were not employed anymore at the city because it doesn't look like they were moved.
Sure.
And so I just wondered if the first list could indicate either moved or new position or no longer employed or something.
Okay.
Just like a check mark or something.
Okay. We'll work on that for next month.
Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns? Otherwise, we can place that on file. Okay. Number 3, discussion and possible action approving a one-time lump sum bonus to designated employees.
So this may seem like a little bit of deja vu because we did discuss this item in the last meeting under our recruitment and retention discussion. We've brought this item back because when we last discussed it at this committee, we just talked about an unspecified lump sum bonus being granted. And also we referred it to the finance department for consideration under the budget. And the finance committee removed this item from the budget but indicated support using this year's funds to institute this item. So what we've done is fleshed out and described the bonus. We have a $1,000 lump sum being granted to non-represented employees who are at or above midpoint in this calendar year. That represents more than 1% increase for almost all employees. There was about 8 of our highest paid employees that it was slightly less than 1%. Some of our lower paid employees, this actually represents 2% or more increase in pay. I don't know if there were any questions. The fiscal impact for this item as it currently exists is $105. That is not all necessarily funded by the levy. There would be utilities and other funding sources as well. So when it was a budget item, I believe it was about 87,000 that was going to be a levy impact.
Questions? Go ahead.
Just to refresh my memory, this $1,000 lump sum, is that just something for this year, or is this something we will be doing every year?
This is a one-time item.
Okay.
So it would be this year only as a retention initiative. and kind of a recognition item for those folks that are higher in the salary ranges. Under our recruitment and retention initiatives, we were doing some stuff for people below midpoint, and we didn't want to leave out the folks above midpoint, so. Go ahead.
I was looking at this and I was wondering, it's leaving out some employees. And it's not the same percentage for employees, because some are gonna get higher percentage-wise, more pay on their wage, and some are not. And it's a one-time deal, so is a one-time lump sum good practice for retention? So those are my three concerns, you know what I mean?
Sure, and I can kind of walk you through the process that was used when we were making those determinations. We did look at a percentage pay increase versus a lump sum. Lump sum is equal, but perhaps not considered equitable because of that differing impact. And we leaned towards the flat rate lump sum because we felt like the higher impact was going to those individuals who were probably more in need because they have a lower regular pay rate. So if somebody, you had to be over $100,000 for this to be less than 1%. So generally speaking, those aren't the employees that we usually think of as in need. When we considered this for non-represented, one of the reasons that came up was because the recruitment and retention initiatives are focused currently towards our non-represented employees. I did some work for you based on kind of the salary increases that have been done for represented versus non-represented employees. And our union employees have received COLAs in the years that our non-represented employees did not. And so even though our salary scales are keeping in line, when we looked at the actual pay, a non-represented employee on average who was here before in 2012 received a pay increase in the last decade of about 26%. A firefighter, for example, who was hired in 2012 has received a pay increase of 56%. Police officer was more than 60% increase, and a bus operator had an increase of 95%. So right now our emphasis was on those individuals who were under the last wage study and kind of making up for those loss of COLAs. As far as the efficacy of this for retention, under the Fair Labor Standards Act, if we give basically a bonus. Let's say I say I'm going to give you a bonus, but you have to stay with me for this period of time to get that bonus. That bonus then becomes subject to it's considered taxable. And so what that basically means is that bonus now has to be calculated into your overtime rates, which is very difficult for payroll. So we were trying to design this program in such a way that it was the easiest to administer for payroll, and it didn't become subject to some of those FLSA regulations. But to comply with those FLSA regulations, it does become a little bit less effective for retention purposes because somebody could get this bonus and they could leave. We're looking at it at retention through recognition. We didn't want to leave those folks completely out of our current line of incentives. But I do agree with you that there are other ways we could set this up where it could be more effective for retention, but that runs us afoul of some other regulations.
For instance, police officer percentage increase, does that number you quoted take into account officers, brand new starting officers start at lower rate than officer one?
I believe so, yes. Jennifer calculated that for me, and she said that if an officer was hired in 2012, so it would be all the increases that a new hire would have experienced from that date moving on.
So that percentage is not a true wage increase because the officers actually make less than their quota they're gonna make when they start. I mean, I don't know how to actually
Sure.
say it, but you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Well, so those items are considered steps through their, or they're
Correct, okay.
equivalent to the steps through the pay process that our non-reps have as well. So a non-representative starts at minimum, which is below market. And then based on seniority and tenure, they advance through the pay scale. A police officer advances from for example, I think they're starting at officer 85, and then they go all the way up to a police officer 4, just through seniority.
Do other departments do that also?
I believe so, yeah.
All of them?
Well, I'm sure there's somebody out there that does something
No, I'm
different,
sorry,
but it's pretty
all
common.
city departments, all
Oh, I'm
our
sorry.
current city departments.
Firefighter, I don't believe is currently doing that. Firefighter has a, well, actually, no, firefighter still increases through seniority as well. So yes, I can't think of any position off the top of my head that doesn't have seniority advancement through a pay scale. Some positions for fire, we've eliminated it, so it's a flat rate, but they're promotion level positions.
So a lump sum with varying percentage degrees of pay increase for the employees across the board is seen as equitable?
It's, arguably, it's equal but not equitable. Because it's the same amount, so everybody gets equal pay, but the impact per each person is different based
Right.
on their normal rates.
Okay, just not too happy with lump sums because it's, it's a one-time deal, and is it real, in my mind, is it really a bonus or incentive to stay here for more than a year? So I don't think this one's for me or the right way to go. I believe at this time. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Thoughts? Feelings? I think that Alder Wodinsky brings up some good points that we have talked about at length about does the, $1,000 bonus really add to retention when that's what that's what we're targeting. I believe it was discussed in finance quite a bit as well, because somebody could pocket the money and say, see ya. And that maybe will happen. I just have a question with that. A lot of employers are doing, we're offering a bonus, but they kind of space it like 500 now or 250 now, 250 and 6, and space it, to make sure it goes out for a year. Would something like that be, cause any legal problems if it's the same amount in the same year? Or I guess we can't because it wouldn't be done in 2021.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily legal problems, it's just considered a different type of bonus under the FLSA, and it becomes subject to overtime calculations. So anytime that a bonus is contingent upon a promise, you have to meet this criteria to get it, as opposed to after the fact me saying, great job, you didn't know it, but surprise, here's a gift for you. So anytime it's contingent upon a promise, you have to meet standards, you have to still be here, you have to do something, then it becomes subject to inclusion in our overtime calculations. So an hourly employee's overtime rates would have to be increased commensurate to the bonus amount.
Question? Or, I don't know if this is the right topic to state this under, but my question is going to be, what are other municipalities doing in our area? I mean, how do we compare to Weston, Mountain, Town of Maine, Schofield, the comparables right here where people can go live in their same house and move and work at a different job? How do we compare to them with incentives, pay, and benefits?
So I reached out to Marshfield, Stevens Point.
Marshfield's not right here. I want right here, Marathon County.
Well, I can tell you that we were only able to find, I think, 2 municipalities that were doing this type of lump sum bonus, so it is definitely cutting edge. I'm not aware of any neighboring municipalities that are giving equivalent recruitment and retention adjustment.
Are they doing other things that we haven't thought about yet?
I haven't heard that anybody is at this point doing anything.
Thank you.
Was there a motion made before we had discussion?
No, because I wanted to kind of get the discussion, and then we can make the motion.
Okay.
I guess I wanted to hear, there were questions about this. This has been kind of, I don't know if everybody watched the finance discussion with this as well. So, is everybody okay with, is there any motion on there to do the $1,000 for the year of 2021, a one-time lump sum bonus for the designated employees stated in this
I will
action?
make that motion
Okay,
as you speak.
thank you.
I'll-
Yes.
I'll second that, and then I want to make a comment.
Go ahead, make your comment.
Yeah, and I do believe that, well, remember when we were talking about this in the finance committee, because it stated that this would be funded with carryover funds. This is not 2021 carryover, but 2020 carryover, if I remember correctly. There was sufficient money left in, from last year's budget that we would be able to use. So that's why I believe there's a little bit of, and a need to, if we were going to enact the bonuses, it has to be done before the end of the year because it is 2020 carryover and not 2021 carryover. So there'd be no really way to defer this into next year, if I remember correctly.
Yes, we were talking about 2020 carryover funds and initiating them as soon as possible after it's passed also helps us stay on the right side of those FLSA guidelines that we were hoping to keep this not overtime impactful.
So while it's probably not the best retention tool, it does say to our employees, especially the ones that are over midpoint, and many of those have been struggling with, our salary steps over the last 2 cycles as we try to get people up to midpoint and then beyond midpoint to fully fund our salary study. This does say that, you are a valuable employee and that, we recognize your accomplishments in the past year where this was a very, this year and 2020 were very challenging years for many of our city staff.
Okay.
I agree somewhat that, we got to do something for the employees because we need to keep up with industry, but a one-time deal in my book is not doing the right thing for the employee. I mean, we have to have something that's long-lasting. Thank you.
Do you want to, we have other things, this is just one tool. We are doing other, recruitment and retention with wages. This is just the one tool that we have for this bonus, correct?
Yes, a couple of items that are kind of ongoing for fiscal impact that have already been approved include suspending steps 1 and 2. So we'll be moving any current employees who are on those steps up to step 3, effective November 14th. And also start recruiting at that step 3. We're also advancing people up to midpoint faster. So there would be 6-month step increases as well as 1-year step increases. So we've halved the amount of time to get to midpoint. And those things had some pretty severe fiscal impacts. So originally the plan was to hope to use ARPA funds, which is one of the reasons why we were looking for this temporary measure to be not base building, because it opened up our possibility to use one-time funds like these carryover funds or ARPA, whilst those other initiatives were being absorbed into the budget.
Any other questions, concerns on this motion? Okay. The motion's on the floor to accept the $1,000 one-time lump sum bonus for designated employees. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. All right, we have a 3-2 on the bonus. Thank you. Okay, excuse me. Discussion and possible action amending vacation accrual schedule for non-represented employees.
So one of the other items that we talked about last meeting was increasing the amount of vacation time that employees are receiving. And while the idea received support, we didn't really flesh out what that would look like. So I have thrown together some options here. We did, several years ago, study how our vacation, I want to say it was 2018, we updated our vacation schedule and we compared us to other municipalities. And we were cutting edge at that time. So what you see here are just a couple of options that, to be perfectly frank, I just made up for some ideas of how we could advance vacation quicker. Our current schedule for vacation accrual is when non-represented employees are hired, they earn vacation time at 10 days per year. When you complete 5 years, you go up to 15 days a year. After completing 9 years, you get 20 days. After you complete 18 years, you get 25. And upon completing 25 years, you get 30 days. So a couple of options before you. We could increase people what is effectively like a day a year. So during your second year, you get 11 days. Your third year, you get 12 days, and so on and so forth. As you get more tenure, you're earning a day every 2 years, but it's kind of a deferred approach. We could start everybody at 3 weeks. We could shorten the time span any way you guys were looking at. Really, we can do anything. The sky's the limit. 64% of our employees have more than 5 years of vacation. So anything that we do that impacts employees at greater than 5 years will impact pretty much half our workforce. So one consideration is, will we be so generous in giving vacation time that we need more staff to cover time off? I think it's kind of the great unanswerable question. I did some quick math before we got down here. Like I said, 64% have over 5, 43% have over 10. That said, I can't remember the last time I've hired someone and had them not ask for more time off. This is something that candidates want. Employees want. Work-life balance is important. So, I would encourage the committee to consider the options and let me know what they want.
Go ahead, Jim.
I like this option. I mean, if this is what the employees want, and I would like to maybe find out from some of the department heads have they heard this, the employees want more time off? Is this something that would help keep them there? I think, I would like it.
It was a very common answer in the employee survey as well.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Madam Mayor.
Oh, I just wanted to let you know that every person that I've been involved in hiring in the last year and a half, vacation time is one of the number one negotiable things, and they want it. And also, I want people to work here to also take time off so they're refreshed when they are working here for the people, because it is a grind.
I think people work for their families, and to give them more family time is great.
Go ahead, Jill.
I think it's great because, you were talking about employee retention. We have to keep up with the private market too, and factories and all are moving ahead with more vacations and stuff too, and it's, you gotta have time off because you get burned out. Thank you.
Which option do we like?
Yeah, that was my next question is, go ahead.
I was going to ask a quick question, but do you have any idea of like a percentage or the number of employees that don't use all of their vacation time? Or how much unused vacation time sits out there at all, or?
So we have a maximum vacation bank. So you're not required to use your vacation time per year, and you're allowed to carry it over from year to year. So I couldn't tell you how many people leave time on the books, although I would suspect it's a majority. I can give you an idea of how many employees we have who are kissing up against the maximum, which is probably something like 10 to 20%.
Okay,
So it is something, as the mayor mentioned, that we can do better at encouraging people to use that time. I think there's in part, people like to, and I'm as guilty as it as well.
Yes, you are.
I'm taking
Every
Thursday off.
department head is guilty of this.
But I think if we give people more, those people who sit on vacation will end up taking more vacation because they'll have that feeling of security that they still have their bank available to them.
how much are they able to bank at the end of the year?
You can carry over a week more than your annual accrual, unless you're a department head, at which point it's a higher percentage that you
Okay.
can bank.
Okay,
So if you're accruing at 10 days per year, you can carry over 15.
okay.
And we would have to adjust the maximums accordingly, depending upon whatever structure that we support today.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dawn.
I just want to add my 2 cents worth and say I definitely agree to give people the opportunity to have 3 weeks vacation at the time of hire. I really do believe in that.
Okay, we have some different options, so I want to make sure we're all talking about what options that you like. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I looked at the options and I'm not sure. I mean,
Yeah.
which one would be best for the employee and the city? I mean, you got to balance it somehow, and then you talk about the carryover. I think the carryover probably should be capped, even if we raise the amount of time the employee can use. I mean, what's the liability for that carryover? I mean, is that something the city's worried about, or don't we care? So just some conversation points. And, which one? I don't know.
Really, the only liability that comes with the carryover amounts is upon separation when vacation time gets paid out. Upon retirement, or if somebody resigns with appropriate notice, they can be getting paid out some significant amounts of time. But with that already built into the existing system, I don't believe there's much added liability in that avenue. When we discussed the finance director and I were discussing adding vacation time versus adding floating holidays. Floating holidays don't get paid out and they don't carry over, but they apply universally, whereas vacation time we can target to those in need. And when this item was discussed last month, the committee indicated that they wanted us to focus on vacation time. So that's the presentation for you.
Can an employee buy back his vacation and, in other words, not take the days but take the pay? Okay. And then I would, if it's appropriate, I would like to make the motion to accept the second proposal here.
So that is, employees would start at 3 weeks of vacation.
Correct.
Go to 20 days after 5 years, 25
Correct.
days at 10 years, and 30 days at 15 years.
I would like to make that motion. We go with number 2.
Any second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Further discussion? Go ahead, Jim.
I like the one also, however, I am just a little concerned if there's gonna cost us the citizens any money. I mean, I know there's gonna be probably some departments that may have to pay overtime or to cover some of that. I mean, of course, department heads will have a hard time, spreading all those people out. I mean, people are gonna get vacations, not some bad times a year for some people, but they're gonna get the vacation so they can go do stuff, but, so, is there a way we can maybe, before it goes to council, get some idea what possibilities might be on cost?
And if I could add too, adding to Alder Wadinsky's point, we're, now I'm looking at the flip side of the coin is, would you rather pay people overtime for filling in for people, or would you rather pay people overtime because they don't have enough people?
Good point.
So, thank you.
I mean, overtime's inevitable, a little bit
Yeah.
here and there, but I just want to keep a cap on it a little bit.
Yeah, I think department heads, I just think of DPW, I mean, because you have to look at this at time of hire. So your new employees will be, will be gone and more, and your, more seasoned employees also has more vacations. So I don't want that to crash into each other. I think that's a good point. And that's up to the department heads. If they feel they can handle it and keep, everything running smoothly, I have no problem with that. I will tell you that in my, my age, I think I would much rather have vacation. I think that self-care and vacation is important, as everyone else seems to think, as coming in. So we do have a motion and second for number 2, which is starting at time of hire 15 days, upon completion of 5 years, 20 days, upon completion of 10 years, 25 days, and upon completion of 15 years, 30 days. That is the motion, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. We are on to discussion and possible action, amending Employee Handbook, Section 5.02, Compensation Plan Administration.
So the Employee Handbook, Section 5.02, includes a recognition program that's called a Discretionary Performance Incentive, or DPI for short. And DPIs can be granted to employees under the criteria that are listed in the packet. They have to have an evaluation on file that has overall exceptional ratings, a recommendation from the department director, and it has to be within the budget approved by the Common Council. The Common Council has not granted a dedicated budget for this item, I don't believe since it was created. This particular language was added to the handbook under a director before me. I discussed it with a previous council requesting a dedicated budget, but at that time it wasn't supported under the supplemental budget process. So what we've been doing is we have been granting GPIs, but it has to be within the existing salary budget for a department. So what that's done is that has had the impact that only departments that have vacancies that result in salary savings are able to recognize their departments. Also, because there isn't a dedicated budget, there is no cap or limit on the amount of money that can be spent on these recognitions. So it's had the side effect of base building increases being granted and ongoing budget impacts are being experienced. DPIs are getting more and more popular, which I think is a good thing because it's important that we recognize our employees. But they're growing quite rapidly. In 2019, we spent about $4,000. In 2020, it was 12, and 2021 to date is almost 37. And most of that is base building. So there's two things going on. One is that department budgets are being impacted without much limits by council, and also that smaller departments that have a stable workforce are unable to recognize their employees. So I wanted to draw this item to council's attention. I think we have 3 options before us. We can do nothing. We're aware of how this is operating, and if council is comfortable with that, we can continue as we are. We can try to establish a dedicated budget for this benefit, or we can modify the incentive program to grant equal access to all departments.
Go ahead.
Is this, when a DPI is given, does it go through a committee first?
Currently, the process is the department director makes a recommendation, and I evaluate the recommendation to make sure it complies with the program description. And if it meets the requirements and the finance director confirms that it's budget neutral, then it's granted.
So the savings from an employee not being in a position could be eaten up by this DPI, where another department that doesn't have an open position has no money to use for that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we need to change that. But under staff recommendation, you have a or, so is it one or the other you want to do, or which one do you think is best?
You know, I'd prefer a dedicated budget because I don't want to modify the program in such a way that it limits our ability to recognize employees. Because I think that's a critical component of our compensation structure, is that when people are performing exceptionally well, that we're able to financially compensate them for that behavior. So my preference would be a dedicated budget, but barring that, I would recommend that we tweak the process for fairness.
Question, so do you want, how do we dedicate a budget for this? I mean, do you have a number in mind? We would have to go back to finance. I'm just wondering how we would dedicate a budget, or do we just say to finance, we need a dedicated budget for this?
Sure. I think you could do either. You could tell finance that this committee sees the need for a budget, and you could refer it to finance for that discussion, or you could make a recommendation for finance to consider. Based on the current needs and the way that it's growing, I would think we would need a budget of somewhere between 25 and 50 at a minimum. Ideally, I'd like to see a budget that's divided out per department. I mean, because there's two ways you can do it. You can give HR a pot of money to sit over and to try to make sure it gets used universally. But to be frank, I would rather each department got a portion of that pot to use as they wish, and that they just refer the recommendations to HR for program compliance. But the ultimate determinations on how that money is distributed amongst their employees remains up to them. I don't want to be the line manager or the playground monitor. It would be nice if each department got a budget. I could do some homework if you'd like to kind of figure out a per department amount.
Yes, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for finance as well, that they would they would understand, and they can add it up and do the lump sum and figure out where it could go.
Sure.
You're looking for 2022, correct?
Yes,
Okay, so we're going to have to be fast?
Well,
probably.
very, very fast, or otherwise we're going to end up going to be a budget model
Yeah,
after the
it would
first
end
of
up
the
being a
year.
budget mod already, because we're talking about the budget tomorrow.
Yeah. So,
So this is kind of, it is what it is.
I'll make a motion to,
Go back?
what she said, to establish a dedicated budget through finance, because HR believes that DPIs are a very important tool for the city to move forward.
Do you want to see the dedicated, that's a question, do you want this to come back to this committee with the budget amounts per department? Or do you want
I think
her
I said
to do
that,
the-
yes.
I didn't
So
hear.
you want it here, or you want it to go to
I'm saying it now.
finance with that?
Okay. Okay, yeah, so that's fine. So you want it to come back here first and then on to finance, correct?
Will that be quick enough?
No, well, it doesn't matter. I think that's a moot point at this
would
point.
could it go to finance first and then come back to HR, and then we could decide how to allocate it?
We may be able to do a joint
Or-
meeting as well.
I guess it just depends on how, time is of the essence, how much, how fast we want to move on this.
I mean, HR usually meets the Monday before finance, so if we're talking about December, it could go to HR on Monday, finance on Tuesday, and then potentially with a suspension of the rules, straight to council.
As a budget mod.
You're
because
here.
the budget would have been
Yeah.
already approved.
Yeah, that's Mary Ann. When is the budget? I know tomorrow's the public hearing. When is the budget?
On the 22nd.
The 22nd of November. Yeah, the budget will be approved, so.
We could do a special HR meeting.
I mean, I hate to just throw that back to finance and think, that they're gonna do that. I don't wanna put them on the spot, that we're gonna do a special finance
Oh, I'm
meeting.
sorry, special HR.
HR, I mean, but then they would have, well, I guess it could go, I don't know, go ahead. I mean, I don't know if we can do it after the public hearing, because we are giving the public hearing tomorrow,
Sure.
and then I don't think that's a bait and switch, so, go ahead, Mary Ann.
So, Tony, would one possible funding mechanism be the unanticipated savings from the employees that selected the less expensive health insurance?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're looking at, Ann Keenan from my office is still calculating the number of people who took the narrow versus broad network. So there may be some budget savings from those determinations that could potentially be used to fund this.
So, Mary Ann, do you believe that, I mean, how awful it would be us to go through this and then throw it back to finance for a budget mod?
I don't think that would be hard, especially if we, if we had savings such
Right.
as that to reallocate. That wouldn't be hard at all.
Okay,
So that mod could be done in the December meeting then.
Right.
you're right, yeah. So, yeah, and then we would have more ideas about the thing, you can come, about the savings, so, go ahead.
I keep going back and forth when I think about this from a budgeting standpoint, like, it does seem to be, what we're talking about is what, $40,000-$50,000? And so maybe this is another opportunity to look at how this process went, and if we're looking at process improvement, making sure we're doing the right things. I don't really know how this has gone in the past, but I know how it's going now, and we're trying to retain people, so this will offer us some insights, I think. So I hope that you're willing to listen to a report from us on how it went next year, so.
Definitely, I mean, just because it's in a budget also, doesn't mean we have to spend it all. I mean, I don't want department heads to say, hey, there's money, let's give some away to this employee, but I want it to be for the purpose. And
Right.
and if we have more, maybe we'll have to ask for a little more money, so.
My experience has been that there have been more requests that are turned down because they don't have vacancies of people who, in my opinion, are deserving, than misuse of this being given to folks that didn't qualify. Our department directors do a stringent job in considering, and I do, when necessary, put them through their paces. They submit a memo supporting why the recognition is deserved. And if it is lacking in information, they do provide more or redraft those items as needed, so.
Okay, so I think, and if I gather everyone's comments, that we, and I'm not putting words
Go ahead.
into your motion, but that you are basically directing our HR director to come back with a dedicated budget per department at the, what did you say, the 50,000 or what kind of?
Yeah, for the December meeting.
For the December meeting, with the idea that it would go to finance and back to council for a budget modification for 2022.
That's exactly what I was trying to say.
Thank you. Okay. That is the motion.
And I'll second it.
Thank you. Second by Herbst. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Okay, we're on discussion and possible action amending Employee Handbook section 5.08 shift differential.
So we talked about shift differential a meeting or so ago, when we amended the amounts that were received. But since then, an item under consideration has arisen from the Public Works Department. So currently for shift differential, to receive that benefit, an employee has to work a schedule that includes 4 or more hours after 4:30 PM or 4 or more hours after midnight. The request from the Public Works Department is to consider amending this policy to allow employees who are removed from those evening shifts to, at the employer's request, to continue to earn shift differential even though they are not working 4 hours after 4:30 or after midnight. I believe the impetus behind that request is flexibility to not reduce employee pay when employees are adjusting their shifts to the benefit of the city. We did survey other municipalities on this topic, and it's not a common practice. The majority of other municipalities require the undesirable shift be worked in order to earn the differential. And in fact, most municipalities don't pay shift differential for leave time, like vacation and sick leave, but we do that. So if you call in sick on second shift, you get the differential for those hours. One item that could be considered is to offer a benefit which is similar to what happens per the police union contract when an employee shift is changed. If an employee shift is changed with less than 7 days' notice, police officers receive a pay benefit. So we could require 7 days' notice for a shift change. If that notice isn't met, then they could get the shift differential for that week period. If shifts are delayed or moved by a short period of time, less notice is required. That would be 24 hours notice if it's only moving an hour or two. So that's an option before you. I don't know if there's questions about the request or the potential solution before you.
I have a question. Okay, so I'm trying to understand this. So somebody's working second shift.
Yes.
They have a shift differential. They are moving to another shift permanently, correct? Is this what we're talking about? Or they're moving because, I mean, that's what I want to understand. What is the move for?
Sure. So occasionally employees are moved temporarily off of second or third shift. And the reasons for that can vary. For example, this summer, most of our mechanics worked first shift because of short staffing. So instead of keeping them on second shift, we pulled them into first shift. It's my understanding that that happens moderately frequently in the motor pool division. I do know that HR gets notified at least once or twice per year that a mechanic is moving shifts for a short period of time. When they move permanently off the shift, they forfeit their shift differential. This is a second shift employee who's called in onto first shift, or third shift employee who's called in onto first shift for some reason or another.
And how long does that call-in last?
It varies. I've seen them as short as a week or two, and this summer we had employees who came up for several months.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Does this affect the snowplow staff? Because does the snowplow staff compensation already compensate them for the various shifts that they're gonna work, depending on when it snows, when it needs to be removed? Or would they fall under this also?
So our plowing staff can at various times qualify for both overtime and shift differential. Usually what happens is if you're called back in a normal day, it's overtime and therefore excluded from shift differential. So if we have a plow employee who works a normal shift and then gets called back in at 10 o'clock or 7 o'clock because of snow event, that individual, that individual is receiving overtime until midnight. And then after midnight, they usually start earning something with a shift differential depending upon whether they have 4 hours or more. So it's a pretty complicated process that's at play with our plow individuals. This is really intended more for a formal shift change as opposed to that. Those individuals would qualify anyway. And also, I find it pretty unlikely that we're going to get 7 days notice of a snow event. So this change probably wouldn't impact those guys anyway. I mean, that would be awesome if all snow events, they let us know a week in advance, but unfortunately.
I like it with the notice.
Go ahead, Dawn.
To me, I look at this shift or differential, and I just say, wouldn't it be easier to just go straight across the board? or just simply to do the overtime rather than throw in this shift differential, I think this has got to be a nightmare for accounting.
So employees who get shift differential are usually individuals who are regularly assigned to a second shift. So their work isn't overtime. It's our second shift mechanics, for example, who are always working second shift. So their normal 8 hours are subject to a shift differential benefit to make up for the fact that they're working evenings, which is usually less desirable and harder to recruit for. So if we just granted overtime, all of our people who are regularly assigned to second or third shift don't qualify for overtime on their regular shifts, and they would be losing pay.
Okay.
I think that if you had employees that are scheduled for second shift and get called in for first shift for a limited amount of time, there would be less of an incentive for them to want to work those shifts if they don't receive their differentials, since they're normally scheduled for a second shift position.
I believe that was a concern that was expressed by the department director, that employees may be less willing to come in on first shift to help out with that reduction in pay.
And I think probably the employees this impacts the most are DPW, on-call employees, motor pool.
It's mostly DPW and our utilities employees.
Yeah, because police and fire they're represented, so this doesn't apply to them.
I have a question. When somebody is hired, is this laid out that this could happen? Or when they go, or they choose second shift, or they're placed on second shift, or they said, there may be times when we would take you to your day shift if needed, and the shift differential explained. I guess I just need to know that they had some forbearing that when I work first shift, this is what I make. When I work second shift, this is what I make.
Most of our employees that are hired for an off shift are trained on first shift and don't receive the shift differential during their training period. So yes, that is something that is usually discussed and gone over during the hiring. Now, whether we go into detail that there's the possibility that during the tenure of your employment, you might be called off of shift, and at that point, these things are going to happen. I doubt that it's gone into in that level of detail. Usually, it's just a matter of here's the policy, here's how you qualify. When you're training, you're on first shift, so you're not going to get it. So it's something much simpler. Now, of course, that would be nothing that would prohibit us from explaining those things either. It would be pretty straightforward for us to add that into the orientation.
Go ahead.
Is the Public Works Director on board with this? So is this what they would prefer to have, what the police have?
I think he was hoping for something more generous. When I talked to him about it before this advanced, he was supportive of it.
Of what?
The proposal at hand, yes.
Do we,
Sorry, you said he wanted something more generous at the beginning?
Well, when we first met and discussed, he just said he wanted flexibility. When I looked at what other employees received, I sent him the staff memo. I asked him if it was okay to proceed, or if he wanted it to look differently, he okayed it to proceed.
Okay. I like it the way it is, but I guess that when it comes to council, I'd like his input before we vote on it.
So do I take that as a motion to accept as written?
I don't, did you, I can ask my question first.
Absolutely.
I guess, yeah, I was gonna say, did you have the fiscal impact in here? But I think I found it here and it written out as a few $1,000s, provided it doesn't expand to include represented employees, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to anticipate because people being pulled off that shift is so irregular and not particularly tracked, that it was hard to guess. That's really just the best guess would be, if we're assuming 7 days of a couple of hours happening to a handful of employees per year, it should be relatively minor.
And I'm guessing that something like this probably could be charged against employee vacancies, since the reason why an employee would be taken off of his assigned shift would be to fill in for a vacancy or whatnot. So that would probably be the main, I'm guessing that would be the funding source for this, would be out of the pool of employee vacancies, so.
Yeah, I think we may have had a time or two where someone comes in on a different shift, even though there are no vacancies. But when they're for long durations, usually they are for covering vacancies. So yes, that would be a viable funding source.
Okay, okay. So, in that case, I'll make a motion to accept this.
Second? Thank you. We have a second by Alder Wodinski. Okay, any other questions or concerns? All in favor
I
say.
keep hitting the
oh,
button. I apologize.
I'm sorry, stop it.
I know.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Oh, okay, we are on to discussion and possible action approving 2022 part-time/temporary seasonal pay schedule.
So the current budget includes a cost of living increase for non-represented employees. And this item is just asking for whatever projected, whatever cost of living increase is granted to regular non-reps also apply to our part-time, temporary, and seasonal employees.
So move.
Thank you. Is that a second, Mike, or a question? Okay, thank you. Any further questions or concerns? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye as well. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Discussion and possible action amending the employee handbook, section 5.06, compensatory time.
So today's our day for technical items here in the HR committee. Comp time. Right now, our comp time policy says employees can earn comp time in lieu of overtime, which means that for the majority of non-represented employees, they only earn overtime after they exceed 40 hours per week. So that's the policy as it's written. The practice for comp time is that employees can earn comp time if they go over 40, but they also can earn straight time comp time. So at a 1-to-1 rate instead of a 1-to-1.5 rate, if they exceed 8 hours per day, or if they exceed their normally scheduled shift. So basically what we're asking for here is for the committee to determine whether they want the practice to match the policy or the policy to be amended to match the practice. There should be no fiscal impact if the policy is amended, because we're doing it anyway. If we align with the language, there could be a slight increase in overtime payments because of the time off will be paid out instead of, so salaries could go up moderately because instead of banking comp time and taking that time off, we'd be paying you when you exceeded your 8 hours at the straight time rate. One item that we've heard kind of anecdotally is that this method does allow people to bank more time, which then can design some coverage strains. I don't know that there's a perfect answer. I just kind of wanted to see what the body wanted to do.
Go ahead.
What's your suggestion to the committee?
Well, the current practice has been in place for longer than I and our payroll clerk has been here. So it certainly is a lot easier to just amend the language to match the practice. I have not had a burning push, or no one is knocking down my door saying that the practice itself is faulty or causing problems. So I guess I would recommend that we revise the language to match the practice.
I would have liked to have seen that on your recommendation.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Then I will make the motion that what you just said, that we
Okay.
will,
Okay.
however you put it,
So update the policy to match the practice.
exactly. Thank you.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second by Wodinski. Any other concerns or questions?
So just to be clear, they're banking comp time instead of us paying out overtime.
We wouldn't be paying overtime, because this time isn't eligible for overtime, but we wouldn't be not paying straight time. They'd be getting comp time instead.
Comp time. so they could bank comp time?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe we'll see people doing it less now that they're earning more vacation time. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
I know, right? It's
Yeah.
a mystery.
Okay, any further questions? Otherwise, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously as well. And we're on to discussion of possible action creating a utility worker position in the Public Works Department.
So this is a bit of a housekeeping item. We have a street maintainer employee who is out, usually our least senior street maintainer employee, and that individual is assigned to second shift, and they assist the motor pool on second shift. Running parts sometimes, doing maintenance in the shop. They're also a second shift person on hand in case street sweeping or plowing or those types of duties are needed. The issue that we have is because they are street maintainers who have the right to move off of second shift according to seniority, every time we hire a new street maintainer, we lose our second shift guy and we have to train a new one. We also are usually seeing employees that thought they were being hired to do first shift street maintainer duties being less than thrilled with the actual responsibilities of the second shift position. So they're even more eager to not do that job because it wasn't the job they applied for. So what we're doing here is creating a separate position, classified exactly the same as a street maintainer, with exactly the same responsibilities that that person is currently doing. But because it's a standalone position, that person wouldn't be able to automatically move on to first shift. And also, they would be applying for the job they'll actually be performing upon hire, so hopefully they'll be more satisfied with those responsibilities.
Go ahead.
Did someone at DPW bring this forward?
We've been talking about this with DPW for ages, but we've been trying to do it when the position is vacant, and so we kept needing to post the position and fill it. So yes, there is this job description has been reviewed by both the motor pool supervisors and the director. We've actually been talking about this with Rick. That's how long we've been talking about this.
Will the pay scale be equivalent to street maintainer? So if the employee does not move up to street maintainer, that he'd still be getting the same pay and stuff?
Yep.
And then if it really gets, or if it's really that, I'm just a little torn because, you know, usually when you start a job, you start on the bottom. You start on a job that you don't prefer, but you're looking for the next level. So once something opens, you can move out of that start job, start position. And that's what I see this as. This is where you start. You do a lot of work that maybe not everybody wants to do, but they do it anyway. And then when the opportunity arises, you're out, you can move. But now, if you make this a different classification, will you have to apply to move out of there then?
Yes, if the employee wanted to not be the second shift utility worker, but wanted to be a street maintainer or equipment operator, they would have to apply for those jobs separately.
So instead
Our
of,
hope is that we'll get somebody who actually likes those responsibilities and is happy to stay instead of experiencing the constant turnover that we have now.
where is that person?
We'll find out. We do have an issue too that when you hire 3 or 4 street maintainers at one time, you know, only one of them is really starting in this position. So this would make it a lot clearer as well. People would know what they're getting into.
So by creating this utility worker, then the street maintainer would be more focused on what they need to do than, and the utility worker would be, I guess the street maintainer wouldn't have to worry about doing utility work and concentrate more on what they were hired for. Is that what you're saying?
We always have one street maintainer who's doing this utility work anyway. We would just be calling a spade. Instead of saying you're a street maintainer who's doing this instead, you'd be a utility worker assigned to do those duties permanently.
Okay.
Is there a person in that position now? So no one to grandfather that?
No, we're carrying some street maintainer vacancies, so there might be a body in that role, but once we hired a dedicated person, that individual will be freed up to go to first shift.
So I'm going to just do a little bit of counterpoint on Jim's thought that, because I see this as potentially a good thing, because training new employees costs time and money. And to get a person into a position and to retain a person in that position will make a overall cost savings. So utility, I'm guessing if utility workers and street maintainers start off at the same step and grade, then it's a good thing, and they can, slot a person in that's more interested in this type of work versus the other type of work. So I guess I see it as a net win.
I agree.
Would that position require a CDL also?
Yes, because they would be doing backup responsibilities with plowing and
got
et
it,
cetera,
yeah.
so yeah, they would still need it.
I'll make the motion, we go ahead with this.
Okay, there's a motion to go and create a utility worker position in the
Correct.
Public Works Department. Do we have a second? Second by Herbst. Any further comments or discussion on this? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes unanimously. Okay, we're getting there. Discussion of possible action grandfathering the city assessor under Employee Handbook 4.06, separation of employment.
So a couple of years ago, we updated our requirements for when an employee is reinstated, and we created a tiered reinstatement benefit. So if an employee comes back within a year, they get their seniority back, they get any balances that hadn't been paid out, and they get their PEP eligibility back. If you're between 2 and 3 years, you get your seniority and your PEP, but nothing else. And if you're here after 3, you get hired without having to go through the competitive process, but otherwise, that's it. And so the request before you today, we made that change to aid in the recruitment, particularly for some fire department positions. And what I'm hoping to do today is to grandfather that benefit to our city assessor. When we hired back our city assessor back in 2017, I'd been on the job for about a month. And he asked for those benefits, and I told him that we didn't currently have a provision that allowed it, and that was it. I think if I had been here longer, I would have known and that I could fight for it and take it to council, and I would have just asked for that change sooner. So I am hoping to apply this benefit to him, basically grandfather him in. He would return to being PEP eligible, get some sick leave balances back, and probably earn a little bit more vacation time. Yeah.
I definitely would like to make a motion that we grandfather the city assessor into the reinstatement language revision, as you have stated.
Thank you.
I think that is a super good deal, to be able to do that. Because that is a taxing job, no doubt about it. No pun intended.
Second,
Second, okay.
with a question.
Go ahead.
On the first paragraph, it says that we've amended language to essentially make a person, an employee whole if they were gone less than a year. And it says in the third paragraph that the city assessor came back and be gone with less than a year. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, if this language had existed when he was brought back, he
Oh.
would have gotten these things, but the language wasn't in place at that time, so he didn't get it.
Got it.
We
Thank
did
you.
it after he came back.
I'm assuming this is the only employee that this would apply to, because everybody past that point would have been covered under the current reinstatement language.
Yes.
So, okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I did not hearing one. And we are now to adjournment. So I don't think anybody wants to go.
I'll make a
Oh,
motion
I
to
think
adjourn.
Alder Larson and Alder Wodinski do. So we are adjourned. Thank you very much.